here. And I imagine some of you are as well. So thank you for taking your time and joining us, even if it's in the warmth of your own home. And if you've got littles in the background, we get it. No big deal. You just navigate your life however you need to today. Okay, that's how we're going to do this. I am recording, and so we're going to go ahead. And we knew that our population or our audience might be a little bit smaller today just because of the weather and circumstances. So we'll make sure that this information is available on YouTube later. So if you want to share it and want to make sure that you've got friends to see this conversation, we can do that. Thank you for being here. I'm Erin Tink, and I'm the Executive Director here at the Waterloo Community Foundation. For those of you who've been around for a while, typically our program manager, Paige Price, leads this conversation on a monthly basis with our nonprofit community partners. She had a healthy baby girl in January, and all is well in Paige's world. She and baby and an older sister are doing well. Everybody's in good shape, and we look forward to welcoming her back later in March. She'll gradually return, and you guys will be able to see her here on Windows in April. So we look forward to having her back. In the meantime, you get little old me, and we look forward to this conversation today. We have the privilege of hearing from Bob Lincoln, who is with Elevate, and they are providing mental health services here in Waterloo and also in our surrounding community. They have a no walls approach to providing behavioral health responses to Black Hawk County and our surrounding counties. So I'm really interested in hearing what his agency is working with, how they do their work, and we're hoping that we can glean a little bit about what are the trends, what are the services, what kind of seems to be happening, not just nationally speaking, but also here locally in Waterloo. How does the mental health crisis that we're seeing, we think, how is it affecting our population, and what kinds of things is he seeing? So I'll turn it over to him. As you know, you can put questions in the chat at any time during this conversation. He will be sharing with us for the first larger portion of our conversation today, but then we're going to lean into the questions quite a bit today. So if you have questions that you would like to ask, please do put them into the chat. I will monitor that situation, and then we'll ask those questions at the end here. So thank you, Bob. Welcome.
Well, thank you. It's great to be with you all, and I recognize some partners in the on the screen, and some terrific stakeholders. So I'm honored to have the opportunity to be with you and share something about Elevate. And again, a lot of you through your gifts and support have made Elevate possible. So I want to start off by thanking you all and having the opportunity to serve the Waterloo community. We're located right on the government square. We're the old law office, just kitty corner from the city hall and the courthouse. So we were very intentional in locating here. We wanted to be accessible. We wanted to have an opportunity to integrate our services with the system, with the courts, with the correctional system, and accessing the most dense population that we can to serve the community. So I'll just start off with a little overview, or a little who we are, and values and mission statements. And but again, at any time, if you've got any questions or comments, I certainly enjoy a more casual conversation than a formal presentation. Okay, are you seeing that okay? Oops, I gave you the wrong screen. Let me try again. Well, Aaron and I even practice this. Here we go. So we call ourselves Elevate. Our nonprofit corporation is called Elevate Housing Foundation. As Aaron said, we're a clinic without walls. This is a foundational principle of a certified community behavioral health clinic. And a certified community behavioral health clinic is the new federal vision for community mental health centers. This vision was drafted in mental health excellence legislation in 2018. And then during the pandemic, the federal government and SAMHSA pushed funds out through this demonstration model to expand access and to really change how community mental health center services are delivered. So really being without wall, reaching out in the community, engaging folks, meeting people where they are. That's why our mission is to serve people where, when, and how they choose. The other foundational principle of this model is integrating behavioral or substance use disorder treatment, if you will, mental health treatment, and coordinating chronic medical conditions. So it's very much founded on a whole person approach. Uh, just before I get off the subject of CCBHC, the state of Iowa just became a certified community behavioral health clinic state. And this is one of the uh, uh, strategies the state is using to leverage more federal money and to expand access and quality of behavioral health care. So these new clinics will overlay, in many cases, just transition the existing community mental health centers into a more integrated platform. I hope I didn't get too much in the weeds for you there. Again, our mission is to serve people where, when, and how they choose. Our values are very important to us and guide us. We want to be present. We want to be safe. We want to be welcoming, purposeful, productive, and competent. So that drives all that we do. A little bit about our programs. The main gap that we filled beyond being that integrated clinic was providing mobile crisis services. And I don't know if any of you have had an opportunity to access mobile crisis services in the area. Blackhawk County, on average, has about I'd say about 500 to 600 calls a year, and obviously most of those calls are calls within the Waterloo Cedar Falls area. What it means when a mobile crisis response is requested is two trained first responders trained in de-escalation and first response behavioral health care. Two individuals will come out where you are. And again, we were so lucky with how the contract was issued that we were able to go to gas stations. We can come to your place of business. We can come to the jails. We can come to nursing homes. We can come to wherever we can be of support to folks that are experiencing the onset of a behavioral crisis need. Oftentimes in crisis services, we get caught up in what is a crisis? Should I call? Am I really? Is this bad enough to call somebody? And the other positive thing about the transition that we're undergoing is we're really leaning into the notion of prevention. So why not get help, reach out when things are feeling like they're going the wrong direction? And so we don't qualify any crisis. You call and we come and we have that conversation. And hopefully we get there before anybody is harmed or suffers any injury. The way you access mobile crisis, I hope all of you are familiar with 988. No? Yeah. Well, 988 is a national program, and it was launched, oh, I think it's 2 or 3 years now. Iowa intentionally did what they call a soft open, that they wanted to make sure that they had the capacity to respond. And I would say now they've done a good job. So 988 is a 24/7 hotline, really for any mental health and behavioral health crisis, gambling, substance abuse, suicidal thoughts. You can call 988, and most often those calls will be answered by our 24/7 call centers in Cedar Rapids and Iowa City. And it's their job to stabilize, provide resources on the phone, or to then reach out to the designated mobile crisis services and get people to connected with services. So this is the having 988 across the state and having mobile crisis available across the state has really been a huge transformation of the mental health center, our services in the last year or two. This kind of talks about, again, in our effort to fill gaps, we've done a lot of grants to try to expand access and diversion of youth. We've done a lot of work with law enforcement. One of our crisis workers is embedded with the Waterloo Police Department. And we're now having conversations of expanding that capacity as the Waterloo Police have found that to be so valuable. And I really applaud the Waterloo Police Department, because you don't just add this resource to an agency. They really committed to changing their agency through the investment in crisis intervention training. And so they put almost all of their officers through an intense 40-hour training to be able to identify people that are experiencing behavioral needs. And then with that heightened awareness, now we're giving them some additional tools and resources to address those, where in previous years that may have resulted in people being unnecessarily incarcerated or arrested, or not connected, ignored, and not served as well as we can as a community. So very, very proud of the Waterloo Police Department's work, and along with the Blackhawk County Sheriff's too. It's really impressive to see law enforcement's awareness and need to address the behavioral crisis services that they encounter and have been their sole responsibility for really, really too long. Crisis observation services. Again, the mobile crisis and the 988 are all pieces of a network of crisis services that Iowa launched back in 2018. So there's been a lot of work building out this capacity. Waterloo has a access center, which is a hospital diversion center outside of town on Dunkerton, where a law enforcement or mobile crisis can take folks and directly admit them into crisis stabilization to avoid unnecessary hospitalization and to give, again, connect people to the resources that they need. Elevate does provide all the traditional outpatient services within our clinic. We do therapy, medication management, substance use disorder treatment. We've really identified as a need around the substance use disorder treatment within the community. And because our partners with Pathways have always done a good job with residential, we really focused on a more community-based but intense treatment model that we call partial hospitalization, where people are with us every day of the week while we integrate them into the community and help them with their recovery and try to stay connected with them as long as we can. So we hope to continue to expand that capacity to meet that ever increasing need. We do offer a lot of peer support services. Again, this is a very strong trend in mental health and behavioral health services, and it's just a solid trend in any sort of recovery. We all know after we finish with the treatment, the surgery, the whatever we've gone through, connecting with people with lived experience really then expands our ability to manage that illness and recover fully or manage effectively with that illness. So it's not unique to substance use disorder. It's not unique to mental health. It's always empowering to have a community with people that have shared like experiences and can share knowledge and resources to move forward. So we're again very pleased that Iowa is starting to recognize that, starting to reimburse and expand access to that. The iStart program, I won't spend a lot of time talking about this, but it's a program I'm personally very proud of. It's a program we brought to Iowa in 2014 to anticipate the closing of our resource centers, Woodward, and then this year we closed. Oh, I already forgot what it's. How can I forget? But anyway, institutional care for folks with intellectual disability. And what the iStart team brings to the community is an interdisciplinary team that can support people with complex needs. It's really a support system for our good community providers, such as EPI, where when they have people that exceed their capacity, we can come in and give them additional resources to be successful. But now I think I'm getting a little bit in the woods. So that's kind of that's Elevate in a nutshell. We are now also expanding a service called Assertive Community Treatment in Waterloo. This service, again, is an interdisciplinary team that supports individuals with complex and serious mental illness. And so, again, this is a need we've identified in the community, and so we want to step in and fill that void and expand capacity with our partners. So now that's stuff about Elevate. To kind of talk about systemic changes and the whole issue of mental health, and Aaron alluded to it, that there is there is a sense that, oh my goodness, this mental health is getting out of hand. Everybody's got mental illness, but I think it's really really much more a case of awareness, uh, destigmatization. I know when I talked to my daughter who's just turned 23, and for the last several years, the conversation with her was a conversation I would have never imagined having at her age. Um, uh, Peers and herself freely accessing therapy and medication support and peer support, and so there's really an engagement. And when we really talk about mental illness, really what we're talking about is well-being. And so well-being impacts all of us. What we call an illness is when we have a condition, a brain health condition, if you will, that starts significantly interfering with our work, our ability to self-care, or our relationships. That's when we know that we've kind of stepped into a clinical condition where we would really benefit from professional support. But on the flip side of that, there's so much research now around staying well and how do we prevent and how do we recognize the toll that stress has in our life and how do we manage that and regulate that. And I think that's a challenge and an opportunity for all of us. We know that diet and exercise have as much to do with our mental health as any sort of medication or therapy we might receive. So that's kind of in the context of overall wellness. I think when we look at the youth population, um, I think there we have more reason to be concerned, more reason to invest. Um, Clearly, the COVID epidemic had an impact on our youth. In talking with the school systems, we take for granted the kind of advancement that occurs in the structure of a school, and just hearing elementary school teachers saying, we're still working on lining up for the water fountain and things we take for granted and we think are natural, but not at all. That's part of our social development. And so that really distracts from the learning, and then obviously creates stress on our young people as they recognize that they have catching up and they've lost some ground. Again, we're seeing the school systems do so much more in terms of providing resources and connection to our young people, and really pleased to see that. The Waterloo school system has always done an outstanding job of doing that, and we can all be criticized for not being able to do more and help everybody, but they're certainly moving in the right direction. And then, of course, social media really is um, probably the pandemic, if you will, of our current time. And I think the real tension there is our young people are really, and particularly in adolescence, their normal development is to move from the family unit to the peer unit. So they're going to pull away from us. They're going to connect with their peers, and that's all a positive and a positive development. But then when it becomes anonymous connections or unknown connections, there's real risk. And so I hope our policymakers will continue to assess those risks and provide more safety and more guidance to families on how to protect young people and still allow them to be empowered by what a tremendous tool our phones are. The research I'm seeing is children that are allowed to text with their friends is a very positive thing. Children that are allowed to go on social media where there's no control over what they may access can obviously be destructive. And I know you all have your personal stories on that. So now I'm starting to bore myself, so I'm going to stop. When I start listing myself going, I know I probably could talk too long. So any questions or comments if I've stimulated something you'd like to.
What a great way to demonstrate self-awareness there, Bob.
Yeah. Seeing a few heads starting to, yeah.
You're not boring any of us. So just
Oh, oh,
just so we're clear on
there.
who you're boring there. Oh, this is too funny. Well, I know that I've got a couple of buckets of things, some rabbit trails I want to take in this conversation. So things that I want to certainly dive a little deeper on regarding connection to homelessness and how that's
Mm,
in our community. A connection. I want to dive a little deeper on youth, and some of us just read a book called Anxious Generation, and I want to kind of chat about that a little bit. And then the third area is I know that for the state of Iowa, we've had quite a bit of realignment in terms of
mm,
behavioral health falling underneath human services. And I kind of want to hear even structurally how that's impacting you, and it's, if there's any advocating that we can do. So I've got some buckets, friends, just so you know too, things that I want to be able to ask Bob about. Please always throw your questions into the chat. Also, if you want to just direct them specifically to me, you can do that. And we'll certainly get to those. Before I dive deeper, though, Bob, I do want to start more personally. What got you into this work?
mm.
Why does it matter to you? And what joy do you find in it?
Oh, well, that's a lovely question. Um, in college, I studied industrial psychology, so I didn't see myself going into social work. And so later in life, when I returned to Iowa, when my father was struggling with an illness and to be supportive to my family, I ended up running serendipitously for county supervisor in Mitchell County and got elected and got on the board and realized at that time counties took care of behavioral health. We had a county care facility and we had files of individuals that had services in boxes behind our desk. So that was the old behavioral health system that I knew. And when I talked to the other supervisors, they didn't want my involvement with the gravel and the roads and the engineer. So they said I could have the mental health thing. So that's what I did. So I did that as elected official. And then in 96, uh, was really the first Iowa reform in behavioral health, and they created a system that they called Central Point of Coordination. Uh, and so then I stepped into that role, and then just kind of evolved from there. And then it's had really been a passion for the last 30 years. Thank you for the question.
That's wonderful. And I think a really interesting background information about sort of how maybe even societally and maybe legislatively how differently we have handled mental health over the decades. So it's really interesting. We're not, and you would be able to tell me how many decades in we're at this point of sort of de-institutionalizing or less institutionalizing some of our fellow community members who have mental health crises,
Yeah.
um, and how that then interacts with some of the other systemic issues that we may see, right? Like its connection to homelessness or its connection to law enforcement or any of these things that appear to be on the rise. Is any of that just because of the difference between um, previously institutionalizing some of these symptoms versus maybe less so now?
Yeah, yeah, that's a really big question, and I can talk in the context of decades, unfortunately. Um, so there was a kind of a benchmark research done uh, paper. It was called "No Room in the Inn," and essentially what it did was research the impact of deinstitutionalization not too long ago, if you had a mental illness, you were dropped off by your family to one of Iowa's mental health institutes, Independence, Cherokee, Mount Pleasant, Clarinda. And then you may stay there the rest of your life. They were communities, they had their own fire. If any of you toured or been on their campuses, they were essentially a community within a community. if you improved enough to return to your county, each county then had a county care facility. And again, it was, we used to call it poor farms. And then with the passage of Social Security, people didn't have to be there so much for poverty, but then those folks that had behavioral health barriers to living in the community ended up staying there. And so then that was our system for a long time. With the advent of medications, then we started deinstitutionalizing our MHIs. The sad truth behind all of that, we can spin it as advocacy, but the ugly reality was really because of Medicaid. Because when the feds passed Medicaid, they told states you can't use Medicaid, you can't supplant Medicaid with what you're currently spending at the MHIs. So that was a natural economic incentive for states to start reducing their MHI beds and saying, well, now that we have Medicaid, you can get services in the community. And I think, and again, I'm not talking about Iowa. I'm talking this is a national issue. All that we really did nationally is the creation of the community mental health centers back in the 60s, the Kennedy administration, with very little funding to get that up and going. So really not much has happened until this current time. So from that perspective, we really are in a transformational time that now after we, well, let me, I lost my thread. The point I wanted to make from that paper is at a certain point in time, let's say we had 2,000 plus people at the Mental Health Institute. When we reduced the population of the Mental Health Institute dramatically, what do you suppose we did? What was the counterbalance to that? Increased incarceration. Surprise, surprise. And so Tony Thompson, our former sheriff, famously said he ran the largest mental health institute in the area, and he wasn't lying because, again, when there isn't that structural support for folks and we don't have community capacity, that's the safety net, if you will.
Yeah,
So,
very
so we're really, so the work we're doing now is really trying to recover from that poor transition.
right, right. And I think that's nice to be able to put some words to some of the things that many of us are feeling. And when we're not in the middle of it, we just don't necessarily have the definitions for why does this seem like an increase? Why does it seem like it's landing in law enforcement? Why does it seem like that hasn't always been the case? But to know that some of it has a chronology attached to it, and to know that there is sort of a transition being taken, and not necessarily smoothly, or not smoothly, right?
Well, yeah.
Uh, and we don't know where it is, and we also don't know where the end is, right? Like we don't really know what the destination is that we're headed toward.
I think that's fair.
Okay.
Certainly, more social justice, more humanity. Right now, Waterloo as a community and Mayor Hart are very focused on homelessness, and so we're honored to be part of that conversation with many other agencies. Um, what I will share with you, there's a lot of myths around homelessness. We think that it's a lack of housing, that if we just had more affordable housing. The direct experience I've had with helping folks that are chronically without housing get an apartment, getting the apartment was the easiest part. The hard part was getting benefits started. The hard part was negotiating relationship with landlords and overcoming past uh, reputations, uh, reducing substance use to a safe level. Um, I I'm thinking of one individual that it was 2 years. Uh, he lived on the street for 2 years, but started getting connected with us, and we finally got him housed. So and his situation can't be generalized either. Everybody has unique challenges. So I would say with the homeless, we really have to engage. Uh, um, but then the flip side of that too is we can't be sympathetic to people that are panhandling and being disruptive to our community either. And so, um, with mental illness and any behavior, there's always reasons we behave the way we do, but there's not always good excuses for
That's so important. I think being able to vocalize how complex oftentimes
it.
these
Yes,
particular issues are, right? Like we see this connection between mental illness and homelessness. Um, and then when we look at homelessness, we need to know that there's a variety of different reasons why people end
yes,
up chronically homeless. And
yes,
our services need to be diverse enough in order to provide lots of different types of ways in which we can serve people, and usually over a pretty long period of time, in order to provide the type of support or safety net that people need in order to uh, find their stability.
yeah.
um
I
Tell me a little bit. Yeah, I would love to hear. Sorry to interrupt you. Please finish that thought. And I would love to hear as you look at the landscape of our community and sort of, and I like to use the word ecosystem for just a healthy ecosystem of, and let's just talk about chronic homelessness too. It, what kind of services are needed in that space? What are you seeing that still seems like it's missing, whether it's transitional housing or whatever it might be? So continue.
well, what I was going to share is kind of a profound perspective or realization when I transitioned 4 years ago when I started Elevate or opened the Elevate Clinic here. This was my first. For some reason, I thought I could be a provider. Previously, I had just been a public health administrator for the county and then the region. Um, but what really struck me is because I had this 30,000 feet perspective of problems and needs, and I would work with the large providers, that I thought I knew what was going on in the community. And when I opened the clinic, I couldn't believe the number of wonderful programs and people and agencies and the things that were, the complex web of services. So again, I never want to say that, oh, things are horrible, because I am astounded every day by the things that are being accomplished by so many amazing agencies. And I would like to name a few, but then I would forget one and feel bad. So that really, there's so much done, and really so much done without much money. And the churches, the work that the churches do, and other nonprofit organizations. So it's made me much more hopeful and positive than when I had a broader, more superficial perspective. And I forgot, did I answer your question again?
No, that's okay. The second part of the question was, as you look at the landscape of Waterloo and our surrounding communities, what do you see as some of the missing pieces of this ecosystem? Where do people who need that longer term support or even crisis support, where do they seem to be falling through the cracks or not getting what they need?
I Yeah, yeah. I'm kind of surprised I'm saying it, because I think we've got some amazing agencies and resources here. I think the challenge really is accessing the benefits and the funding that I know my agency partners will say we find somebody that we can serve and meet their needs, but then we can't, you know, keeping people on Medicaid. You can't, I've got people living in the street that they they thought they had Medicaid and that they come in for services and we check and going, well, yeah, we sent a letter to your address. Who knows what address that was, saying you didn't respond, so we canceled you. And so then you have to go through the bureaucracy to get them started again. Or if they're destitute and don't have resources, getting somebody on Social Security disability, even with obvious disorders, give yourself 18 months and you may be successful. And oftentimes people, again, with a behavioral health disorder, um, it's it's hard to establish. Um, well, again, I don't want to get into the weeds too much, but the reality is, if you got a serious mental illness, there are days, there are weeks, there's even months where you're doing pretty well. But if you have 2, 3 months a year where you're overwhelmed and in crisis, think about how hard that would be to sustain employment, to sustain housing. So now I'm getting on my soapbox. Now I really got to cut me off.
We love it. Hey, we love a
Yep.
soapbox, so I had to take
Okay.
it up on it. Um, yeah, what I hear you saying is oftentimes the benefits are maybe available to people. However, there's a long gap between I have a current crisis or a current need, and I have an eventual benefits that may be accessible to me, but I don't have anything that could be sustainable or helpful in the meantime.
Right.
Okay.
You
Okay.
said it so much better than I did.
Hey, I I just clarifying, right? Just to make
There
sure
you
that
go.
everybody's on the same page about this. And I think that's one of the things that I've been hearing over the last couple of years is that we do tend to, even with our homeless shelters, tend to house people for a short period of time, and yet for a for a portion of the population, a longer period of time in which we can get some transitional support could be more beneficial. And we don't. And I hate to talk about what our community is missing, because we have so many wonderful community partners and assets doing incredible work in this community. So you said that, and I think I also need to say that we have incredible partners doing really hard work in
Really
this
do.
community, and there is still room for some partners and some services in this space.
Well, and I think what you're alluding to, and I think it's just human nature when we want to simplify complex problems. So
Right.
if you ask most people uninvolved, what do we do about homeless? Well, more shelters. Well, I actually researched that, and when I was serving as a regional administrator, I had two. I'm not going to name the communities, but Waterloo was one, and then there was another community that had invested heavily in shelters. And ironically, what I found is the one that had invested in shelters had struggled with homelessness more
Hmm.
because the shelter was not the solution. It collected the problem, and then because you can't create enough shelters, so then you start putting time limits on it, and so now you're throwing people out of shelters. So you're evicting. I mean, this happens every day. And what I was always so impressed with Waterloo is, and kudos to People's Clinic and Black Hawk Grundy that really invested in the coordination of homelessness, uh, connected with the individual, problem solving with the individual, and of course, you need that capacity too, but it's the solution is never one service. That boy, when we have shelters, homelessness will go away. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that's really good.
Mhm.
It's that inherent need, I think, for most of us to want to be efficient about
Yes,
something that's not efficient.
yes, Yes.
or to reduce it down into something that we can control or something that we can change,
Yes.
when really this is the issue is far bigger and more
Mm.
complex, and we
Yeah.
need to have more capacity to address it in multiple ways.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. We're fresh, as you know, out of a book club, the Union Block, which is Waterloo Community Foundation, partnered with three other foundations: R.J. McElroy Trust, Otto Schweitz Foundation, and the Black Hawk Gaming Association. Just hosted a book club in the last month, and we had about 40 different community members, some health providers and some school teachers and administrators jumping into the phone call, some youth pastors. We just had a really neat variety of people jumping into the conversation, and reading a book called Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. And he addresses a couple of different things that I think I'd love to hear your perspective on, especially when it
Mhm.
comes to our youth. One of them is this difference between he creates a separation or a difference between what he called a play-based childhood to a phone-based childhood.
Mm.
And it's this idea that there's so much social emotional learning that children are doing when they are in free play, and especially when they are allowed to take risks. Um, and how we tend to be limiting that in our current culture for a variety of different reasons. And phones also, because both adults and children, they're addictive little machines, and
Mm.
we tend to gravitate toward them, um, while giving up something that's really healthy for us. So can you
Mm.
talk a little bit about kids and this idea between free play, fun-based childhood? Any insights there that would be helpful?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I think we're coming out of this educational um, trend of, performance-based education, test scores. We want STEM. We want hard outcome. We want to fill up our children. We want them to be smart machines. And research suggests kind of what your author, and I'm sorry I didn't read the book, so I'm not answering the context of where he was coming from. But what other research suggests is the development that occurs during play and recess, all that unnecessary time at school when they could be sitting in a desk and being diagnosed with ADHD, is really has proven to be counterproductive. And then when we add that to tightening budgets, where we're going to give up the arts and we're going to give up athletics, when so much learning and effective engagement. In fact, I know a lot of them employers, when they go out to recruit employees, they're looking for athletes. They're looking for people that have proven success working with a team. So much for a grade point average, right? So again, it's just learning to value that. And again, the notion of play um, is such a complex thing, and the point of play is to be included. And isn't that, the basic need we all have is belonging, including. And so then when we're doing things that reduce that, increase isolation, then obviously more time with ourselves is going to make us more anxious. I think you probably all experienced that. And we know in terms of mental disorders, anxiety disorders represent 20% of 20% of us every year struggle with that. So I think that's an inherently, and we can talk about the genetics of or the evolutionary impact of, you know, developing this hyper uh, fear sense that was key to our survival in now an environment uh, we're trying to survive emotionally instead of physically, and creating all this stress that's really been counterproductive to ourselves. I hope there was a point in that rambling.
Of course there is. Of course
Okay.
there is. It's great.
Okay.
Michelle put into the chat that the book, The Anxious Generation, is on Audible. Was it free for you, Michelle, on Audible, or did you? Yeah, I heard recently that it might have just been made available.
I have a membership,
Okay,
so ultimately I pay, but
Mhm.
it's
in
like
some way, shape, or
14 or
form.
$16 a month, but I like to listen to books.
Mhm.
Love it.
I think an important message with that is just for us to be aware of our anxiety and our moods. Um, I think that's so key because the more that we're aware and in tune to that, then more impact we can have. Um, because it's, another definition of mental illness is just getting stuck. We get overwhelmed and we get stuck, and then we can't act, and then we get more stuck and we get more anxious. And so much of well-being is getting unstuck and taking that positive action forward.
And oftentimes, I think because some of these mechanisms, whether it be social media or whether it be the news or whether it be whatever, um, is causing some of the anxiety,
Yes.
we keep returning back to these sources um, rather than finding each other, right? Or finding other
Beautifully
ways
said.
to connect. So it's an interesting and rather new development, right? In terms of human condition, and um, it's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Michelle, what kind of question do you have?
I didn't really have a question. I had more of a statement. Emotional intelligence, that is something that it's what we're finding is not, it's not taught in school. And many parents need the skill. And so that is what we're finding is, uh, you know, emotional intelligence is understanding yourself and understanding those around you. And those are skills that can be learned. And so I'm I'm interested in listening to the book because it sounds like, I mean, does it address emotional intelligence in the book?
Yes, and
I guess
Amy,
that's my question.
Amy might be able to jump in a little bit too. She was the one facilitating, and Megan too, facilitating our conversations with our book clubs. How would I could probably answer the question, but how would either of you jump in to say how does the book address some of the emotional intelligence um, learning?
Um, Interestingly, I don't remember the book ever describing it as emotional intelligence. However, they did talk a lot about how play is a way of experiencing how to be in relationship. Um, and how do you interact with somebody, even to the point of what does it cost to enter into and to leave a relationship? And all of the dynamics involved in that, including emotional intelligence, right? And so one of the metaphors they gave in the book that I thought was really interesting is the idea of um, I forget exact, and Megan help me out, but the difference between you can give instructions on how to do something like interpret someone's emotions, and you can have a beautiful lesson, but at the end of the day, the way that human beings learn that is to experience it. And so simply giving them the how-to is not enough. That play, for children at least, really is the mechanism by which we experience the rights and wrongs of how to be in relationship with each other. Megan, how would you clarify or add to that?
No, I would just add to the book talked a bit about, conflict resolution, building resilience, these skills that we may have experienced as young people playing together and figuring out on the playground, and now needing to be taught in school or not being taught because we don't have that same level of connection and relationship to one another or to our neighbors, that then it's missing, and then kids are left not knowing how to facilitate those skills and have those skills in their life and their growing up.
That's great. Thank you both for sharing about the learning that you had last month. Bob, do you have, we've got probably time for one more comment, and then I'd like to make sure that I wanted One City has a program coming up that I wanted to make sure that we were sharing with the group as well before we transition off. So love to throw it back to you.
No, please do that. I appreciate the time with you all.
Thank you. We appreciate the work that you're doing in Waterloo. It's so important, and to do it with such a complex mindset and a person first mindset means a lot. And I think as we look at some of these issues in our community, I'm grateful for providers like you that are approaching it the way that you do. So thank you. Your work is important. Thank you, One City. We've got a couple of folks over here joining us today from One City. And speaking of providers in the community who are doing hard, important work, One City is one of those. So Michelle, tell us a little bit about One City, just for anybody who may not know the work that you're doing, and then let us know about the term that you've got coming up.
Well, One City was started in 2018, and it was based on the needs in the community that we were seeing. We had 7 years of research on the issues related to poverty. And we realized that we needed to have a service that, well, it started with working with kids for 6 years and then also research on top of that. But what we realized were that we were upskilling kids and sending them home to families that the parents couldn't get jobs. And it was the stigmas that we were seeing were based on mental health, reentry from incarceration, and recovery from addictions, or those that had addictions. And so we started Momentum. It's a 6-week intense employment program. It's all employment based, but it's really half social service, half employment. And so we are looking to double our work. We're in the midst of fundraising now to double our work, because we're only meeting about 50% of the need over the last year and a half. We've had wait lists. We could have 2 classes going at the same time, but what we do is we focus on employment. The reason I brought up the emotional intelligence is that is one of the biggest things that adults are telling me. People think that our parents teach us this. People think that the school district teaches this, but really, this is what I've been missing all my life. That's like one of the biggest comments that we hear from graduates. But we teach, the weeks go hope, change, and opportunity. And change is life transformation. So we're supporting a lot of folks, continually give support through peer support. It's great. Peer support needs to grow in Iowa. It helps people when they have a hard day, doesn't it, Bob? And so the Momentum program is completely employment. And what we do is everything's focused on employment in those weeks. And I want to hand it over real quick to Alexis Harris. She didn't know she was going to be put on the spot. She joined us as an intern. We've had a great relationship through you and I with the social work department, and she is our supportive service coordinator. But we focus with people that have barriers to employment, all different barriers. And Alexis just stepped into this role. She's working from home today, calling all the applicants that we've had and telling them about open enrollment. But Alexis, go ahead and take yourself off.
Yes, Alexis, feel free to jump in here for just a second, and then we'll wrap up, okay?
Yeah, so I started as an intern, like Michelle said. I'm in the MSW program at UNI getting my master's in social work, and it has an emphasis on trauma-informed care. So I'm really happy to be at One City and to be stepping into this role. I'm enjoying it so far. I don't want to take up too much time.
Good. Thank you both for the important work that you do in our community. Like we talked about, these are complex issues and they require complex solutions. And what we appreciate about One City is your initiative and your dedication to the long-term solution that folks need, because we're humans and it's not simple. So thank you for the work that you do. And for those that want to check it out, Michelle, do you want to throw the link to One City in the chat just to have it so that people can jump over there? Thank you again for joining us today. We're so grateful for your time. Thank you, Bob, for telling us a little bit more about Waterloo and the work that you're doing here. Next month, April 2nd at 11 a.m., we will hear from Mayor Hart, and he will be speaking more about the 2030 vision and progress toward that, as well as other community projects. So thank you again for your time. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe and warm. Bye-bye.
Record.